So today's ruling by the Energy Facility Citing Board was a huge victory for the people of Burrillville, for the state of Rhode Island, and for the world that is facing a climate change emergency. The EFSB ruled, as CLF and Burrillville have been saying since the beginning, that there's no need for this power plant. I think one thing that today's decision shows clearly is that the age of fossil fuels is coming to an end. The ruling today, the decision today, also shows clearly the effectiveness that citizens' pressure, grassroots pressure can have on a regulatory body, particularly when paired up with effective and relentless legal counsel and legal advocacy. The comments of the board, particularly Director Coit today, also make clear the tremendous impact that the growth of renewable energy, including but not limited to offshore wind, is having, and the unanticipated growth of renewable energy was one of the specific reasons cited by the board in coming to the conclusion that there's no need for this power plant, and they were correct in both regards. The development of renewable energy is very, very encouraging, and that development made this plant not needed.
Right.
Good. Were there any particular comments in particular that Director Coit made or others that stood out to you on kind of her logic or line of reasoning? She seemed pretty, assured in her thinking that the plant wasn't needed. What stood out for you in her argument?
Well, on the issue of need that they ruled on, I found it very, very gratifying that Director Coit named CLF's witness, Bob Fagan, named Burrillville's witness, Scott Walker, said specifically that she had found their testimony to be believable, to be credible, with the amount of time, effort, and resources that we collectively put into preparing and submitting those testimonies. Bob Fagan submitted 5 volumes of testimony over the 3.5 years of this case. That was very gratifying. It was gratifying that Director Coit and the other board members talked about the growth of renewables. I think they were right when they talked about that large poster that we had showing the forward capacity auction clearing prices year by year. We called that Ryan Hardy's metric. Ryan Hardy was Invenergy's expert witness on need. Ryan Hardy said at the preliminary hearing of this case on June 12, 2016, that the way you can tell whether a plant is needed is you look at auction clearing prices. High clearing price in an ISO auction means that maybe more capacity is needed. Low clearing price shows that it's not needed. We took, and Ryan Hardy was right. We quoted him in our brief. We used his testimony to show that the plant wasn't needed, and it was very gratifying to see those references by the board to that big poster that we brought in order to convey exactly that idea.
It's more a technical one. So in the when they do the forward capacity auctions, they seem to always show that there's an excess of capacity. What were those sources primarily from? Are they, because obviously wind doesn't show up in those capacity auctions, not yet anyway. So where does a lot of this new
Well, so you're asking about the surplus of capacity
Right.
in the ISO run auctions.
Yeah.
And first, we need to point out that there are 2 separate kinds of surpluses in every one of these auctions. One surplus is the amount of capacity that the ISO actually clears, it buys, it procures in the auction. And as Director Coit said correctly today, that's over 1,000 megawatts beyond what the ISO needs, and that's bigger than Invenergy. But then there's an additional surplus even over and beyond that, and that's another 8,000 megawatts that didn't even clear, that could have cleared.
And where's that coming from?
It comes from a combination of all of the existing and new resources in the system. It's conventional fossil fuel plants, mainly gas plants. It is nuclear plants. It is new renewables coming onto the system and clearing in the auction, including in this auction, offshore wind cleared. Mm-hmm. It is also energy efficiency and behind-the-meter solar resources, both of which are allowed to participate in the auction, and both of which have been participating in clearing in the auction. So the short answer, your question is, where are all these resources coming from? Yeah. And it is a combination of old fossil generation, old nuclear generation, new renewable generation, existing and new energy efficiency, existing and new renewables like wind, onshore, offshore, solar. It is the net sum total of all of those resources.
So Janet Coit made a big point about long-term planning and saying that 20 years is too far to even know what's going on. 10 years even seems too long for long-term. What were your thoughts about her logic there and the thoughts there?
Well, the statute requires that the EFSB look at long-term need. Mm-hmm. And the longest term forecasts that exist in New England for need for electricity are produced annually by the ISO. Those are 10-year forward forecasts. Right. And we put into evidence exactly what all of the recent ISO forecasts are, because they cut our way. They show that this plant isn't needed. You may remember that when I gave that talk at the Cranston Public Library at Saconaset Road 2-3 weeks ago, one of the things I said that was quite surprising in this case is that when the post-hearing memoranda went into the board, Invenergy tried to say for the first time that it was the Rhode Island Division of Planning that did the long-term planning for electricity needs. And you remember what I said at the library?
Yes.
Is I said, that makes no sense because one of the EFSB members, Meredith Brady, works for the Division of Planning.
Right.
She will know. I said this 3 weeks ago at the library. I said, Meredith Brady will know that that's not what the Division of Planning does. It's also not what Invenergy's evidence said to the board. Invenergy put in evidence from the ISO. Now, I didn't know what Meredith Brady was going to say today, and I didn't prep her to say that. But she did. She paraphrased what I said 3 weeks ago at the library. What is Invenergy thinking, pretending to the EFSB that it's not the ISO that does this system planning for the future, but somehow it's the Division of Planning?
Right.
I said, Meredith Brady won't buy that, and she didn't.
Right. So what is the future now? Because we're here, the case seems to be over, but they still have to issue the official ruling and
So the next thing that will happen in this case is that the EFSB will issue a written order reflecting the ruling today. That will be a fairly long document, and it will take some weeks to produce. Mm-hmm. It has to be approved, the actual text has to be approved by all of the EFSB members. When that order is issued, that's what triggers the right of the losing party, that's Invenergy, to take an appeal. The appeal goes straight to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. Invenergy has said that they mean to appeal an adverse ruling. It remains to be seen whether or not they will.
Right.
There is also a question, there is a separate docket pending in the EFSB, docket 2017-01, looking at the interconnection proposal from Invenergy and National Grid, filed it jointly. That separate docket now is moot, because you cannot need an interconnection line to a power plant that doesn't exist.
Right.
So that docket is moot, and the board may dismiss it, there may be a motion to dismiss it, but I think that docket will go away. So the next two things that will happen in this case, in the power plant case, is sometime probably before Labor Day, the EFSB will issue a written order, a decision, reflecting the fact that the permit is denied, reflecting what was voted on today. And then 10 days after that, we'll know whether or not Invenergy is going to appeal that ruling. If Invenergy appeals it, as they have a legal right to do, CLF will continue the case and will litigate against Invenergy. I think it would be wise for Invenergy not to appeal, because they're not going to win on an appeal,
Right.
and enough is enough.
I didn't
but-
see much in the way of like places to break in among the three decision makers here.
Well, no, there were, the vote was unanimous.
Right.
In a circumstance where you have a 2-1 vote, the party that loses in appeals, in the appeal, they'll cite what the dissenter said.
Right.
As the dissenter said correctly, this and this and this, and as the dissenter said correctly, this and, but that doesn't apply
Right.
here. So, you can always appeal, but that doesn't mean you're going to win.
Right. As far as I know, nobody has appealed the power plant decision and won in Rhode Island. Is that true?
Well, but yes, that is true.
Yeah.
Of course, no power plant application to the EFSB has ever been turned down before.
That's true too. Right. Very
So,
cool. All right.
when Invenergy says that the 1986 Energy Facility Siting Act was enacted to help speed up and expedite the permitting of proposals like this, Invenergy is right.
Right.
This is the first power plant application that the Rhode Island Energy Facility Siting Board has ever turned down in the history of the EFSB.
Right. Seemed like a lot was made of the fact that this took a long time to litigate, and therefore they had more evidence of lack of need, if that makes sense.
Well, yes. And I think CLF even said this in our post-hearing memorandum. Because the case took 3.5, almost 4 years to litigate, we had the benefit of year after year after year after year of new ISO information coming out. The board, as I think Chairperson Curran said this today, and she's right. They had Ryan Hardy's pre-file testimony confidently predicting that Invenergy would clear the auction and get a capacity supply obligation on both of their turbines, but he was wrong. Mm-hmm. And he had a confident prediction the next year, but he was wrong. He had a confident prediction the next year, but he was wrong. That because the case took as long as it did, the board had the benefit of being able to assess the accuracy, the reliability, the credibility of Invenergy's witnesses and of CLF and Burrillville's witnesses. And they looked and they saw that Invenergy's witness was wrong over and over and over and over again, and evasive when he wasn't wrong.
Right.
And CLF and Burrillville's witnesses were right. So that's one effect of the delay. The other thing that came up, and Director Coit spoke a little bit about it, and that is that Invenergy has said in filings to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, in filings with the ISO, and in statements to the press, Invenergy has blamed the EFSB for the delays.
Right.
Those people, they're just too slow. It's a bad regulatory process. It takes too long. That's not our fault. But in fact, the delays in this case, were mostly Invenergy's fault. they filed an application for a building permit before they had a secure source of water.
Right.
That is a colossal mistake for a power plant developer. Then they told the EFSB that there would be no cost to ratepayers from this plan, while they clandestinely filed a lawsuit at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in Washington, D.C., to transfer $168 million in interconnection costs to ratepayers.
Right.
That caused a delay.
Right.
Then they signed a contract with one faction of the Narragansett Indian tribe after 12 years of internecine rivalries between factions of the Indian tribe. That led to another delay. That these were mistakes and botches over and over again on the part of Invenergy that caused delays that Invenergy then blamed the EFSB for.
Right.
So now you've got two results of that. One is the evidence result that the EFSB has time to see whether Invenergy's predictions are correct, and then you have the bad feelings result with Invenergy falsely blaming the EFSB members for their own ham-fistedness.
Right. Yeah. I also noticed that Janet Coit brought up some of the what you've heard referred to as I'm not going to say the word lies of Invenergy. Right. She brought up some of those in her thing, saying that she didn't think it was directly on the people representing. You know, she kind of split that hair a little bit. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, Director Coit, I jotted down what she said. She referred to Invenergy misleading FERC, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, misleading the ISO with those forward capacity tracking system reports.
Right.
Misleading the Nature Conservancy, the entity that Director Coit used to work for, and then misleading the EFSB about the reasons for the disqualification from the ISO. I thought that was a pretty accurate recitation of misleading things that Invenergy had said.
Right.
I will observe that both Chairperson Curran and Meredith Brady seem to not agree with Director Coit about that, saying, well, maybe it was a case of one hand not knowing what the other hand was doing. But I think Director Coit did have a good recitation of those things.
And I have one more question occurring to me. People here were asking me what's the difference between with prejudice and without prejudice when they refuse the power plant, and is that an issue, or is that going to come up?
So this dismissal is with prejudice. It means that this case can never be brought again. Invenergy can never refile the 473-page application that they filed on October 29th, 2015. Mm-hmm. However, any company in the world, including Invenergy, could file a new application for a new power plant with a new proposal at any time.
Okay.
The EFSB found that there is no need for this power plant, and the EFSB was right.
Yep.
But the power markets, the energy markets are dynamic, and Nextera, Exelon, NRG, any energy company in the world, including Invenergy, has a legal right to file a new application for a new power plant in that location or any other location tomorrow. Now, I think that is an unlikely thing to happen anytime soon. And the reason I think it's unlikely to happen anytime soon is that capacity clearing prices have been declining precipitously. There's no need for a power plant. It wouldn't be lucrative. Ryan Hardy was right at the preliminary hearing in January 2016. High auction clearing prices show a need and draw developers because they want to make money. They'll make money. low clearing prices show that there's no need, developers won't make a profit, so as a purely legal matter, any company could file a new application for a new power plant tomorrow because it's a new application. But as a practical or economic matter, no power company has an economic interest in doing that, with the energy market being the way it is now, because they wouldn't make any money.
Right.
So I don't think we're going to see another application
Right.
Tomorrow.
And and then you just brought up another thought, hope you don't mind.
No, go ahead.
I hope you don't mind too. They didn't decide on the issue of environmental harm. And it seems to me if they had decided on that as well, that would have given them more of a reason to maybe avoid that area in the future for future power plants, and they didn't. So what's your take on that?
I'm disappointed that the board didn't reach that issue and some other issues as well.
Okay.